Hello, welcome back to my channel, Checks, Captures, Threats. Today's episode, episode 69 of the Chess Guide, we're going over avoiding back rank mate. So, today's episode here, we're going to be going over a few examples, just two and a half or so, because I've just got to show you something on the second one. Now, also, to go on with this episode, there's another series. So, we have 4 series going on right now. But 2 of them, we only spend, quite a little bit of time on them, as they're like a 1 day a week thing. Now, this is also going to be one of those. But this is a really fun one that I wanted to do. I've been wanting to do for time. It's called, what we're going to do is, it's from Live Chess Games, but I'll put them on chess.com and I'll be using it as a game review, and it'll be what I will play as my games, but it will be all gambits. So it's going to be fun. I'm going to be obviously at the start of games, sacrificing pawns and everything. So just trying to show you that this side of the chess guide and the rapid increase, the real, actual openings here. And then also I want to do somewhere, I want to show you the fun side of chess, because it's not all, pain and suffering of some sort. So I like to do that, and that's going to be starting, I think, Wednesday. At least for now, it's just going to be Wednesday. I'd like to try and get multiple videos of this, but obviously at the time now, I've got stuff like the FIDE I'm doing, which has been fun, and all the other stuff. Anyway, that's for Wednesday. And today, what we're going over is just a normal chess guide video here, and how to stop back rank mate. So, in this position here, let's say you was trying to follow a principle of trying to get this rook. It's towards the end game, you want to get rook to his 7th rank, as you do like this. Now, the issue there is you're not looking at your king, and this is what we call back rank checkmate. Now, the reason for this is obviously it's the back rank, and again, it's checkmate. But the reason it's checkmate is because your pawns are blocking your king, and you can't escape. Now, let's just go back a few moves here. How can we resolve this issue? So there is multiple moves here we can do. Now, the most common ones you'll see are just pushing a pawn, as simple as this. As you keep this, if you push it up 2, you obviously aren't protecting now, and this comes kind of a weak pawn that even the rook, for example, could try and attack. Now, this is why this move's the best. Here, obviously, has this protection still. Plus, if they did do a check and your king goes up now, your king is still surrounded by these pawns. Now, again, you could do the same thing for each one. This one's also quite nice because, especially in an opening game, an end game like this here, where after a check, your king is now getting closer to the center, and obviously, because we're in an end game, we want to, get our king close to the center. We want to have our king acting as a piece here. So, and also, you can also make moves like this. It's the same sort of thing. This one, again, you've got to be a bit more careful, because stuff like this can obviously lead to another check, and in a scenario like this, you'd lose a pawn, and it would not be very good, and we are actually a pawn down in this scenario. So, if it was my opinion, something like this, the best move here would most likely be pushing your pawn up 1, or even just moving your king sometimes. Now, this isn't at all the best, you would say, sometimes, especially that these pawns haven't pushed. Obviously, we're trying to progress these pawns at the same time. But now our king is in a nice position. Obviously, the issue here is it puts a little bit of pressure on all of these pawns, and you'd see stuff like this happening. So, honestly, all of those were good and valuable moves. I would say this f-pawn here is very difficult to try and get out. Maybe that's the one time you can push up 2, but again, obviously, you're risking losing a pawn on the opposite side. So, now that is the main way. Obviously, also you've got to think, our rook might not be here most of the time. We might have our rook, closer to, obviously, on f1 where it should be. And most of the time you won't see this. But especially at even 1500 level, it's so easy just to forget, try and attack this whole 7th rank maybe. And you just don't realise that they can just play a rook move down and just checkmate you. So you've always got to be on a high alert just to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, in an opening stage here, we can do a few things to resolve this straight away. Now, if we was to play a normal Queen's Gambit now, here we can actually play what's called the Catalan here. So, this is where we're going to Frenchetto. So, if we just play a few moves here. Now, what this does, as what I'm trying to show you here, is in a minute, we're going to show you, this is the sort of position, our castle. Now, that seems like a nice position. This is the exact sort of position, just with the bishops on the board now, like this. And this is how we had the Catalan. If you had a look here, we had this little lineup like this. So imagine this plus sign there. That's what we've got here. So, this is the fundamental piece here. And now, let's say we pretend to see here, look, their bishop is attacking this pawn. Let's protect this pawn. Now, in this example here, if I was to try that, we would have been checkmated. So, here, if they now push their rook down, obviously, we have a move. We can actually block with our bishop. Now, the point of this is, yes, we're now pinned, but because they haven't got a bishop on their side or anything, we can escape now. So, whatever they do here, push a pawn through someone, now our king can escape, and now our bishop is free, and now we're active with the king and the bishop, and we're not losing anything. So here, again, there is a few other ways as well you can try this. If you don't even just like this, you can use this bishop to stay there and push a pawn, for example. So if there was a check and you didn't want to move this bishop, you can move the king here, and now we have a really nice protected king, still while having this pushed and trying to go for the endgame. Again, same thing we said. Now again, you've got to be careful of stuff like this, where you have the check and then the check, because now you can't move out the way, otherwise you lose the bishop. So you have to stay in one of these two positions. So here as well, you've just got to make sure you always have that pawn thing. So remember, when their rook's on the 7th rank, you've always just got to be careful each side of the board. So honestly, if obviously Franchettering is not the best idea in most openings, but you know, if you play what we call the Castellan, we'll be going over that again another time. But here, you know, any sort of opening that Franchettos, so you know, maybe you play an opening straight away that does that, so you didn't even do the Queen's Gambit here, maybe you just want to do it straight away, and it results into just having a look at it. You know, I'll just play these moves just to show you, this is the sort of protection you get straight away from that, and that will last for most of the game, and this bishop will last here for most of the game. The only time this bishop might not be here is if they try this. That's the only time, and then you still don't take, and you just allow that, because now, after the whole take, our king is now pushed, and if we think by the end of it, if we ever look here, if we pretend that this bishop wasn't here, let's just chuck it all the way over here, that is the sort of thing we'll have if we traded these bishops, you see. So, here they can't play a check, because we can now push our king up. And that's kind of like this first example here, where we showed that pushing this pawn up is quite a good move. So it always has its ups and downs there. Now, obviously, most of the time this is very good. Now, the only sacrifice I'd say you have to do here is obviously you have to kind of Franchetto if you wanted to try this. But there's also other ideas you can do. You could put, you know, a rook obviously on F1's the most thing. You always have a rook on A1 as well most of the time. So as long as you keep one maybe here for most of the game, that's perfectly fine. Have these pawns pushed as well. By the end game, you want to push your pawns up. You don't want to have these pawns still stuck on the 2nd rank here. They're just not getting active. So that is it for today's video. Just to conclude what we have gone through. So to avoid a back rank checkmate, what we want to do is to either, in our first example here, push your pawns, opposite your king. Now, obviously, it depends which way you go, because we don't want to push the F pawns, for example, here. Otherwise, we might lose excess material. And also, we don't want to push too high up to, you know, not protect our other pawns like this. It looks quite ugly to me, as, you know, all it takes is their pawns to block you in, and now you might be limited to a certain amount of moves, and now you might be trapped with that pawn, and that could cost you the game. So here, also, we have other moves that just push your pawn up, but other moves as well, like protecting with a piece, like Franchettoing with your bishop, and having that little stop there, so it doesn't do any sort of damage. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. That was avoiding back rank checkmates. Now hopefully you're not going to be stuck, you know, winning a queen up, and then you realise that you've made one fatal blunder and they checkmate you in one move. Now hopefully you have stopped that by looking at this video. So thank you, and bye bye.